Welcome back. Welcome to the Premier Mindset by Premier Performance LLC. I'm your host, Trent Mahler, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and performance coach, and this is episode 47. This episode is for first responders. It's also for the people who work with them, live with them, lead them, or love them. Today we're talking about the unique psychological and performance challenges first responders face, why so many of the standard approaches to getting help miss the mark, and how pushing through without processing eventually costs more than people expect. This is not a motivational episode. This is not a thank you for your service episode. Respect is assumed here. This is a performance, nervous system, and identity level conversation about what it actually takes to stay effective, grounded, and intact over time in roles that repeatedly expose people to chaos, trauma, and responsibility. Quick note before we dive in, this podcast is for education and performance growth. It's not a replacement for therapy or medical treatment. If there is something you need, make sure you go and get it. All our social media accounts are linked in the episode description at the bottom, so make sure to check those out and get involved, get into those communities as we continue to grow them. Now let's get into it. Let me start with a scene that has stayed with me for a long time. It's late, the call is over, the scene is cleared, everyone else goes home. A first responder sits in their car for a few minutes longer than usual. Engine running, radio off, hands still on the steering wheel, no phone, no music, just staring straight ahead. Nothing dramatic just happened in that moment. No explosion, no sirens, no crisis anymore. What just happened already happened. They're not panicking, they're not crying, they're not falling apart. From the outside, they look completely fine. From the inside, something is buzzing. Something is tight. Something hasn't shut off yet. They tell themselves the same thing they always do. I'm good. Other people had it worse. That's part of the job. Or even, I'll deal with it later. They pull away and drive home. That moment right there is where this episode lives. Not in the chaos, not in the call itself, in the space after. And what never gets processed, and what gets normalized, and what gets carried forward. Now let's slow this down and define what we're actually talking about. When people hear the phrase first responder, most people think police, fire, or EMS. That's accurate, it's just incomplete. First responders also include dispatchers, correctional officers, certain emergency medical and ER adjacent roles, search and rescue, and others who routinely operate at the front edge of crisis. What defines a first responder psychologically is not the uniform, it's the function. First responders are trained to run toward what everyone else is trying to escape. They're expected to stay regulated while others are dysregulated. They're required to make decisions when stakes are high and information is incomplete. They're rewarded for control, speed, competence, and composure. That combination creates a very specific performance identity. This is important, so I want to name it clearly. Most first responders develop an identity built around reliability under pressure. You become the person who can handle it, the person others count on, the person who doesn't fall apart, the person who shows up no matter what. That identity is not accidental. It is trained. It is reinforced. It is necessary for the job. That identity is also where many long-term problems quietly begin. Because the same traits that make someone effective on the scene often make it hard to step back afterward. Willingness to push through becomes unwillingness to pause. Emotional containment becomes emotional suppression. Control under pressure becomes chronic over-control. Competence becomes isolation. Here's something I want first responders listening to hear clearly. Pushing through is not the problem. Pushing through without ever processing is the problem. There's a massive difference between resilience and accumulation. Resilience is the ability to recover and restabilize after stress. Accumulation, on the other hand, is stress that never fully clears and just stacks over time. Most first responders are excellent at short-term resilience. They're trained for it. They're selected for it. What they are rarely trained for is what to do after. After the call, after the shift, after the week, after the years. One of the most common patterns I see in this is first responders are incredibly willing to do hard work. They will train, they will show up early, they will work long hours, they will endure discomfort. What they resist is stepping back long enough to let their nervous system actually complete the stress cycle. And that's where things get stuck. That resistance usually sounds like this internally: I don't need to sit with it. Talking about it won't help. I'll handle it my own way. I don't want to open up something I can't close. Those thoughts make sense given the job. They're also incomplete. Processing is not the same as reliving. Processing is not the same as losing control. Processing is not the same as becoming soft. Processing is a performance maintenance task. One simple intervention I give many first responders early on is what I call a post-exposure reset. Not a debrief and not a therapy session. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, that's it. After a call or a shift or any incident that spikes adrenaline, the goal is not analysis, the goal is completion. So to do this, you want to sit or stand somewhere still. You slow your breathing intentionally. You name silently or out loud, up to you, 3 physical sensations you notice in your body. You let your shoulders drop. You let your jaw unclench. You let your breath lengthen. No story, no meaning making, no emotional deep dive. This tells the nervous system that the threat window has closed. This allows that nervous system to reset. Most people skip this step entirely and wonder why they feel wired hours later. Now, I want to be very clear about something. The nervous system does not care how tough you are. It does not care how capable you are. It does not care how much training you have. It responds to exposure and load. Repeated exposure to trauma, death, violence, suffering, or high stakes responsibility without completion leads to baseline elevation. That means your system starts living slightly on edge all the time. That shows up as irritability, poor sleep, hypervigilance, emotional narrowing, a sense that you can never fully shut off, even issues with drinking, substance use, or impulse control issues regarding sex. It shows up in a lot of ways. Many first responders think that this is just how the job is, but it does not have to be. Here's what traditional approaches often miss. A lot of therapy models are built for people who feel overwhelmed and want relief. First responders often feel controlled and functional until they don't. Telling a highly trained, action-oriented professional to talk about their feelings without a performance frame often backfires. It feels vague, inefficient, unsafe. A better entry point is regulation, not disclosure. In my work, I have people track activation, not emotions. At the end of a shift, rate your activation on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 means calm and settled. 10 means fully lit up, keyed in, or on edge. No judgment, no fixing. Over time, those patterns just emerge. People notice that certain calls spike them more. Certain shifts never come back down. Certain weeks never fully reset as awareness precedes control. This is not therapy language, this is operational data. One more thing before we move forward. A lot of breakdowns in first responders do not happen on scene, they happen at home. They happen in relationships, they happen in sleep, they happen in patience, they happen in the inability to feel present when nothing is wrong. Approximately 72% of first responders report negative impacts on their family relationships, while 80% report negative impacts on their home life due to their work. Estimates suggest a divorce rate between 60% and 75% for first responders, significantly higher than the national average. Some data indicates that as few as 25% of married first responders may retire still married to their original spouse. This does not mean you're doomed or that things are going to go bad for you. There's just things you cannot ignore in your life if you are a first responder, and if you ignore it, you're walking on a path towards things you don't want to deal with. This disconnect is not a character flaw, it is a nervous system issue. When your system is trained to live at high alert, calm can feel foreign. Calm can even feel unsafe. That is why many first responders stay busy, distracted, or activated even off duty. Stillness feels wrong. We'll talk later about how to retrain that safely without losing edge. For now, though, I want to leave you with this question as we move into the next part of the episode. Where in your life are you pushing through things that actually need completion, not endurance? I want you to think about it. Where are you pushing through when in reality we might need to be feeling it and processing it? Next, we're going to talk about trauma exposure specifically. Why first responders normalize things that are not neutral to the nervous system, and how unprocessed exposure quietly shapes behavior, decision making, and performance over time. We'll also walk through another real world story and continue layering in practical interventions that actually fit first responders. Before we go any further, I want to make it something very clear because this is where a lot of misunderstandings happen. Trauma is not defined by how dramatic something looks from the outside. Trauma is defined by how the nervous system experiences and processes exposure. We get so caught up with trauma thinking about what happened and how impactful or chaotic that thing was. What happened honestly doesn't matter. That's why one person could go through something and be totally fine, and someone else can go through the exact same thing and it can wreck them. Because it's not about what you're going through, it's about how your body and your nervous system is processing it and dealing with it when it does occur. So it's not about what's happening, it's about how we experience it, how we process the exposure of it. First responders are exposed to things repeatedly that most people encounter once in a lifetime, if ever, like death, injury, violence, human suffering, helplessness, responsibility for outcomes that no one person can fully control. The problem is not exposure itself. Exposure is part of the job. The problem is normalization without integration. Over time, first responders often stop registering certain experiences as significant because acknowledging them would interfere with function. That adaptation is useful in the short term, but it becomes costly in the long term. Here's a distinction I want you to hold on to. Functional numbness is not resilience. Functional numbness is a temporary strategy. When you tell yourself, that didn't bother me, what you often mean is, I didn't fall apart. Those are not the same things. One of the most dangerous myths in high-risk professions is the belief that if something doesn't immediately overwhelm you, it didn't affect you. The nervous system does not work that way. Exposure leaves residue, even if you can handle it, and residue that never gets cleared changes baseline functioning. This is where I want to bring in a story because it illustrates this pattern better than any theory. And there is always confidentiality anytime we share any of these stories. We will never share anything private as we take the privacy of all of our clients very seriously. So with this story, we'll call this person Mike. Mike was a firefighter with over a decade on the job. He had a solid reputation. He was calm under pressure. The guy people trusted on a scene. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't emotional. He was dependable. Mike didn't come to me because of a specific incident. He came in because his wife told him he was gone, even when he was at home. He wasn't angry. He wasn't explosive. He just wasn't present. Sleep was light and broken. He stayed busy constantly. On days off, he still needed projects, workouts, or distractions. Sitting still literally made him uncomfortable. When I asked him about the calls that stuck with him, he shrugged. That's the job, he said. That phrase does show up a lot. And as we dug at it, here's what we uncovered. Mike had learned to metabolize stress by staying activated. As long as he was moving, doing, fixing, or preparing, he felt fine. The problem was that his system never fully shut down. What that led to was emotional flattening, reducing his presence, a sense of distance from people he cared about. None of this showed up on a call. It showed up in the quiet moments when things slowed down. This is one of the most important things to understand about trauma and first responders. It often doesn't show up as fear. It shows up as constriction, narrowed emotional range, reduced flexibility, shortened views, and difficulty transitioning between roles. One of the simplest, most effective interventions in these situations is learning to complete stress cycles, not analyze them. Earlier, I mentioned a brief post-exposure reset. Let's build on that. Another approach I use frequently is what I call downshift training. Downshifting is a skill. It's not automatic for people who live in high arousal environments. Once per day, ideally after work, I want you to intentionally practice shifting your system from activation to neutrality. This is not relaxation. This is not meditation in the traditional sense. This is teaching your nervous system that it can come down without losing control. To do this, you want to sit somewhere quiet. You slow your exhale longer than your inhale, help calming that nervous system from the inside. You notice contact points between your body and the surface you're on, like a chair, feeling your legs on it and feeling yourself touching it. You let your eyes soften instead of scanning. So you're not focused, you just kind of let go of things. And you do this for like 5 minutes. That's it. Not super long, not super overwhelming. You're just letting your body reconnect back in the present moment and let that cycle complete. The discomfort you feel during this is not weakness, it is just unfamiliarity. Your system has learned that vigilance equals safety, that being on is what we need to do all the time. We're teaching it a second option because if you stay on all of the time, you will collapse at some point because you can't do it forever. Now, I want to talk about why first responders often struggle more than others when they do try to get help. There are three major barriers I see consistently. The first is identity conflict. If your identity is built around being the one who handles things, admitting that something is affecting you can feel like a threat to who you are. The second is language mismatch. A lot of mental health language does not land well with first responders. It feels abstract, emotional, or disconnected from performance. The third is fear of loss, fear of being seen differently, fear of being benched, fear of opening something that can't be contained. All of those fears are understandable. They're also often based on outdated assumptions. Effective performance focused work does not destabilize people, it stabilizes them. The goal is not to dismantle the identity that works, the goal is to expand it to increase your capacity. Here's a reframe I use often. Processing is not about becoming less capable, it is about maintaining capacity. If you never service a vehicle because it's still running, it'll eventually fail at the worst possible time, and humans are no different. One of the most practical ways to approach this is shifting from symptom chasing to capacity monitoring. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask, "How do I recover after stress? How flexible am I emotionally? How present can I be when nothing is happening?" These are the performance metrics. Another simple intervention here is transition rituals. First responders often go straight from high stakes environments into family life with no buffer, and that is a massive nervous system demand. A transition ritual can be something as short as 5 minutes that can help you get into this new routine and get into the family life and out of the high stakes environment mindset that you were just in. Before walking into your home, you can sit in your car and take 10 slow breaths. You consciously let go of the role you were just in and decide who you're about to be next. We are not one version of ourselves all the time. We change hats and change our roles constantly. So if you're going in to be a dad or a mom or a partner or whatever you're being, make sure to take that time and reset before you go into that house and let yourself continue on with whatever you're doing. This is not symbolic, it's physiological. You're signaling to your nervous system that the environment has changed and now what you are doing needs to change too. People who skip this often bring work energy home without realizing it. Now let's talk about something that rarely gets addressed directly. First responders are often praised for being calm in chaos. That skill does come with a cost. Over time, the nervous system can start treating chaos as normal and calm as suspicious. This is why some people feel restless on days off, why silence feels uncomfortable, why downtime gets filled compulsively. This is also why people can sometimes feel better on their days at work than their days off because that's the environment they are set up and ready for and not letting themselves relax. That is not because you are broken, that is because your system has been conditioned. Conditioning can be changed. It is not static, it's flexible. But to make that change, it has to be done deliberately. You have to purposely change things. Now we're going to go deeper into burnout, delayed breakdowns, and why many first responders hit walls years after the most intense exposure. We'll also talk about how high performance and healing are not opposites and how to pursue both without losing your edge. Stay with me. There's a pattern I want to talk about that doesn't get enough attention. Many first responders don't break down early in their careers. They don't collapse after their first critical incident. They don't fall apart when the workload is highest. They break down later, often years later. Sometimes after promotions, sometimes after life slows down, sometimes when they finally have space. This confuses people. They'll say things like, I've seen way worse than this before, or why is this affecting me now? Here's the why. Stress and trauma don't always show up when they occur. They show up when the nervous system finally has room to register them, which is why sometimes when things slow down, we actually get hit by these things that we've been pushing off for years. For many first responders, early career survival requires staying tightly regulated, controlled, and mission focused. There is no space to process, there's only space to perform. That system adapts. That adaptation works until it doesn't. Burnout in first responders rarely looks like laziness or lack of motivation. It looks more like friction. Everything just takes more effort. Patience shortens, sleep stops restoring, small problems feel heavier than they should. There's a sense of being on all the time with no real off switch. A lot of people misinterpret this as weakness, loss of drive, or personal failure. But it's none of those. It's just cumulative load. Things have been building up. One of the most damaging beliefs in high performance cultures is this idea: if I can still function, I'm fine. And that belief can be so toxic, it can destroy us if we hold on to it. Functioning is not the same as thriving. Functioning is not the same as sustainable. You can function for a very long time while quietly draining the system that supports you. This is where delayed breakdowns come from. I've worked with first responders who held it together for 15 or 20 years, and suddenly they couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, or couldn't tolerate stress the way they used to. They didn't become weaker, their system became saturated. Another story here, and this one matters, and again, confidentiality is always in effect. With this person, I'll call her Lisa. Lisa was a dispatcher. She had a calm voice, a sharp mind. She handled high pressure calls daily without visible stress. She was often the emotional anchor for callers in crisis. And because of this, no one ever worried about Lisa. Then one day, Lisa came in after a panic episode that seemed to come out of nowhere. No new trauma, no major incident. What had changed was that her kids had grown up, her house was quieter, her life had slowed down slightly. This gave her nervous system finally some space to process. Everything she had held back for years came forward at once. This is why the idea that if it didn't bother me then, it won't bother me later is false. The nervous system keeps the score. It just doesn't always collect immediately. Here's an important performance reframe. Delayed response does not mean delayed weakness. It means delayed processing. And processing does not have to be overwhelming if it is done gradually and intentionally. If you're not sure how to do the processing working with us here at Premier Performance, we can do that with you. That's part of our passion, and this is part of the work that we do. One of the most helpful shifts here is learning to recognize early warning signals, not waiting for symptoms to show up. First responders often wait until sleep collapses, relationships start to strain, or performance drops significantly before addressing anything because they're so focused on outcomes. If they're able to still function and do what they need to do, they must be fine. But there are earlier indicators you need to pay attention to, otherwise, you're going to get caught up in this burnout before you know it. This is why we discussed breakpoints in episode 42 to go over in detail how to catch these signs earlier. Because the more you see these things, the quicker you catch these things, the quicker you can get yourself where you need to be to continue to operate at these high levels. There are some that we can talk about briefly, such as increased irritability without a clear cause. If you have times where you're just kind of pissed off and you don't really know why, that's a sign to pay attention to. Maybe you have difficulty shifting gears after work. You have a hard time turning things off, or a loss of enjoyment in things that used to matter, things that used to feel really good that now are just kind of flat, maybe dull. It could be an overall sense of flatness in your emotions in general. Maybe everything doesn't feel very, fulfilling or full anymore. Things just kind of dull out. There can be increased reliance on stimulation or distraction. These are not failures, they're data. Another way to frame this is capacity erosion. Imagine your capacity as a container. Every call, every responsibility, every exposure adds weight. If nothing ever empties the container, it eventually overflows. What makes this tricky is that first responders are trained to increase capacity, not empty containers. Training matters, strength matters, endurance matters, but clearing matters too. This is where a lot of people misunderstand what dealing with it actually means. Dealing with it does not mean talking about everything. Dealing with it does not mean reliving every detail. Dealing with it does not mean emotional flooding. Dealing with it means allowing the nervous system to complete experiences instead of storing them indefinitely. Here's a simple but powerful practice I want to introduce. At the end of each week, ask yourself 3 questions. What did I handle well this week? What drained me more than I expected? And what didn't fully resolve? No judgment, no fixing, just noticing. This practice does 2 things. First, it prevents accumulation from becoming invisible. Second, it builds self-awareness without self-criticism. Many first responders are hyper-aware on the job and disconnected internally off the job. This bridges that gap. Now let's address a major misconception. High performance and healing are not opposites. In fact, unresolved stress quietly degrades performance long before people even notice. You'll see reaction time slows, decision making narrowing, emotional flexibility decreases, and communication becomes more and more rigid. These changes are subtle, which makes them dangerous. People don't notice them until consequences start to show up. Another reason first responders resist slowing down is fear. There's a fear of losing the edge, a fear of becoming too sensitive, a fear of not being able to go back once something is open. And these fears deserve respect. They're also not supported by evidence when work is done correctly. And we have to respect these fears because really it's just a fear of not being able to operate in this profession doing these things anymore. And it's a normal fear that we've all had at certain times, feeling like, what if I can't do this? But we are doing this processing, we're doing this work so you can continue to do it. And this is what the evidence shows. And this is why we say if you do it correctly, while we can respect those fears, you don't have to worry about those things. Properly paced processing actually increases regulation. Increased regulation improves performance. And improved performance increases confidence and control, helping you feel better about what you do. The goal here is not to feel less. The goal is just to respond better. I want to be very direct. Avoiding processing does not preserve toughness. It preserves tension. And tension eventually leaks. And it will leak on the last thing you want it to leak. Often in places people care about the most. That's why we have to be careful. Next, we're going to talk about relationships, identity spillover, and why first responders often struggle to fully turn off at home. We'll also look at how to build transitions that protect both performance and personal life without requiring massive changes or long therapy sessions. So let's keep it going. One of the biggest hidden costs for first responders isn't on the job, it's at home, in relationships, in social life, and the small moments that don't make the headlines. The challenge is identity spillover. Think about it. On a call, you're precise, alert, mission focused. You're the person everyone depends on. You make rapid decisions under pressure. You hold control when chaos is everywhere. That identity is critical to your job. It is also very sticky. When you leave the station or the scene or the shift, that identity doesn't always disengage. You're still on. You still have heightened arousal. You're still operating in the mode that has kept you alive and effective for years. Here's why that matters. Your partner may want emotional availability. Your kids may want patience. Your friends may want connection. And your nervous system is still in high alert mode. This is why simple things like being present, listening, engaging can feel exhausting or even impossible. It's not a lack of love or care, it's biology, it's adaptation. I have another story I want to share that highlights this perfectly, and again, confidentially, is still into effect. This person, will call him John. John was a paramedic. He was brilliant at triage. He was fast, calm, and reliable, and loved by his colleagues. He hated to leave anyone behind. At home, his partner complained that he wasn't there. He was physically present but emotionally distant. He snapped over minor things. He forgot commitments. John felt frustrated and guilty, thinking, I can handle anything. Why can't I handle my own life? Through our work, John learned to implement transition rituals between work and home. Before leaving the station, he spent 5 minutes reviewing the shift, not reliving trauma, not journaling everything in detail, simply acknowledging, this is what happened, I did my job, now I am moving forward. Then he did a physical reset, quick stretching, deep breathing, stepping outside in the sunlight, just listening to a little bit of music. Finally, he anchored presence at home. He put his phone away, he committed to eye contact, and to checking in with his partner about something non-work related. Within a few weeks, his nervous system began associating these cues with leaving work behind. His partner noticed the difference. John felt calmer and more in control. This is what I call performance-aligned personal life integration. It's not just about being less stressed. It's about protecting your performance long term by regulating your nervous system and your relationships, as without those things, you can't perform at that level. Another practical tool I teach is micro decompression after calls. Even 1 minute of controlled breathing before getting back into the car or walking on to the next task can reset the nervous system slightly. Over time, the micro resets compound, reducing the cumulative load on the nervous system. Many first responders skip these because they feel rushed, guilty, or fear that stopping, even just briefly, means inefficiency. The paradox, though, is that those who pause strategically perform better, think clearer, and maintain composure longer. High performance is not incompatible with emotional availability or relationship quality. In fact, they reinforce each other when handled correctly. Let's shift now to the professional side. First responders often have a hyper focus on output, number of calls handled, response time, patients saved. Efficiency and competence are rewarded daily. Processing, recovery, and reflection often feel extra or optional. This is where capacity focused metrics come in. Instead of only tracking calls or performance stats, track recovery indicators. Quality of sleep post shift, mood and patience levels at home, energy during downtime, emotional flexibility with coworkers and loved ones. These metrics are performance indicators, not therapy homework. They help prevent the silent erosion of your effectiveness. One more story for this section. Confidentiality always applied, so we'll call this person Sam, who is a police officer I worked with. Sam was a top performer in his unit. He was tactical, sharp, reliable, and loved by his team. At home, he felt disconnected and irritable. Nights off didn't feel restorative. Weekends didn't feel restful. We implemented incremental decompression windows, 2 to 5 minutes between calls, and 5 to 10 minutes post shift, and deliberate breaks over the weekends. Sam also did identity expansion exercises, journaling about his values outside of work, reflecting on who he wanted to be at home versus on the job. Within a month, his home interactions improved. His sleep was deeper and his alertness on the job increased. The irony: by prioritizing nervous system resets, his work performance became sharper, not softer. This is a crucial takeaway. Sam is a great example of this. Performance and recovery are not opposites. They are mutually reinforcing when approached strategically. So if you do take care of yourself, you'll actually improve your performance in the long run too. Next, we'll explore practical strategies for first responders to integrate these lessons daily, manage chronic exposure, and maintain high performance over decades. We'll also tie in actionable tools that listeners can start applying immediately. Now that we've explored the challenges, stories, and hidden costs of constant exposure, let's talk about practical strategies that first responders can use immediately without overhauling their entire life. These strategies are meant to be realistic, actionable, and performance enhancing. First one is micro decompression windows. We touched on this before, but it bears repeating. Micro decompression is about giving your nervous system small breaks during the day to reset. After a call, just take 1 to 3 minutes to breathe, stretch, or just step outside. Even just closing your eyes and focusing on inhaling deeply for 5 breaths can calm your nervous system. It can be pretty fast. If you're moving between calls, try a brief mindfulness anchor, noticing your feet on the floor, your hands, or your surroundings. The goal isn't meditation for 20 minutes, it's about small, repeatable resets. Over the course of a shift, these accumulate and dramatically reduce the cumulative load that leads to burnout. We also have end of shift closure. One of the biggest contributors to delayed breakdowns is unfinished processing. So before leaving work, take 5 to 10 minutes to do a mental sweep of the shift. Acknowledge what went well, recognize what was stressful, note what needs to be followed up on tomorrow. This is not about ruminating or reliving trauma. It's about closing loops and signaling to your nervous system, the shift is over, now I can move forward. Pairing this with a physical reset can be very powerful, like stepping outside, stretching, or even taking a short walk, as it can reinforce the mental boundary. Sleep has to be non negotiable. High performing first responders often under prioritize sleep because they feel it's indispensable. Sleep is non negotiable for performance, and it's more than just rest. Deep sleep consolidates memory, decision making, and emotional regulation. Chronic sleep deprivation increases irritability, reaction time, and the risk of mistakes. I often recommend tracking sleep quality alongside other recovery indicators. Even simple things like consistent bedtime routines, limiting screens before bed, and quieting the mind for 15 minutes can dramatically improve sleep quality. We can also do emotional check ins. High exposure to trauma makes first responders prone to emotional stacking, which is carrying unresolved stress from one call to the next. So implement a short emotional check in throughout your week and just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Note it without judgment. Identify what's from work and what's from personal life. Even journaling for 5 minutes can offload tension and prevent it from accumulating into burnout. And with that, we also have to work on social boundary management. Relationships outside of work are critical for recovery, but they can also be draining if your nervous system is still in high alert. So protect your time intentionally. Schedule interactions that feel supportive rather than obligatory. Be okay with saying no when your energy is low. This is not avoidance, it's strategic energy management. We only have so much energy, we have to make sure to invest it in the right things, and that's why sometimes we need boundaries. There's also nervous system reset techniques. For first responders, nervous system regulation is a performance tool, not a luxury. There are a bunch of breathing techniques you can take advantage of, like box breathing. You can inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6, hold for 4. During downtime, that can help us reset. We can also do progressive muscle relaxation at the end of shifts or between calls to help get our body back in touch again. We can also use grounding exercises like the 5 senses, noticing 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. These techniques are tools you can pull out anytime to reduce sympathetic activation and maintain performance under pressure. We also have identity alignment. Many first responders tie self-worth to being tough or unflappable. The challenge is toughness without regulation leads to burnout. But the solution is to expand your identity to include recovery and processing as part of strength. We can affirm this by saying I am disciplined, capable, and resilient, and processing my experiences make me stronger. Sometimes we just need something to say to ourselves to remind ourselves of these things as we're pushing ourselves to do the hard work. Going further with that, you can reflect daily on ways you manage stress and regulate your system. This reframes recovery and processing as performance enhancing behaviors and not weaknesses. Tracking recovery in general can be very helpful. Performance isn't just what happens at work, it's what happens after work too. So track simple indicators like energy levels at home, sleep quality, emotional availability, or even reaction time during shifts. Over the weeks, patterns emerge. You'll see what strategies work, where fatigue accumulates, and where adjustments are needed. We also need peer support and professional resources, so don't be afraid to take advantage of these things that are out there for you. First responders often feel isolated, but sharing experiences reduces cumulative stress by itself. So you can debrief with trusted peers. You could use professional mental health support when needed. Participate in groups or individual coaching specifically designed for first responders, even work with us here at Premier Performance. Prematurely ignoring signals of stress is not resilience, it's risk. Reaching out is part of sustained high performance. We have to take care of these things early. Don't be afraid to jump on it, and don't let these things snowball into bigger issues. You're going to regret it. Lastly, we're going to tie everything together with a performance-focused integration plan. We'll walk through how to apply all of these things in life, maintain them over years, and reinforce both personal and professional resilience. Now let's bring everything together. First responders are elite performers. Your brain, body, and identity are built for high-pressure situations. But without integrated recovery, even the strongest performer is at risk of breakdown or burnout. This is why a performance-integrated recovery plan is essential. It combines nervous system regulation, emotional processing, sleep, social boundaries, and identity alignment, all spread throughout your day, week, and career. Notice how these tools are not isolated. They're interwoven into your daily life, your work, and your relationships. The goal is sustainable high performance, not temporary fixes. We're not just giving you band-aids. We're trying to take care of this the right way. First responders face repeated exposure to trauma. Pushing through without processing leads to accumulated stress, emotional numbing, and the risk of PTSD. And trust me, none of you guys want to deal with that. We have to avoid these things. The strategies we've discussed provide a first line of defense. Micro resets prevent sympathetic overload. Emotional check-ins prevent stacking. Identity alignment reduces guilt for seeking help. Transition rituals protect relationships and personal life. When these are consistently applied, first responders maintain clarity, decision-making, capacity, and resilience even in high-stress environments. Here's the reality. Implementing these strategies alone is possible, but accountability accelerates results and sometimes deeper work is needed altogether. This is why we've talked so much in the past about EMDR, as it is an excellent tool for trauma. We discuss it in depth in episode 35 if you want to get back to that and explore that more fully. At Premier Performance, we specialize in working with high-performing first responders to tailor their nervous system reset routines specific to their shift schedule. We align your identity with resilience, not just toughness. We integrate emotional processing into daily life without disrupting performance. We track recovery metrics to ensure strategies are effective. And we provide guidance and accountability so these practices stick long term. If you're a first responder or you know someone who is, consider reaching out for a consultation. Even a 15-minute discussion can help identify the exact tools that will create immediate, measurable improvements in performance and well-being. We'd love to help. High performance isn't just about surviving the shift. It's about thriving over a career and living a fulfilling life outside of work. The challenges first responders face are unique. Constant exposure to trauma, high responsibility, emotional isolation, and identity pressures. But the solution is also unique. Integrated, deliberate recovery woven into your daily, weekly, and long-term life. Takeaway: recovery is not optional. It's a performance multiplier. Every decompression, every reflection, every shift in identity reinforces resilience, clarity, and effectiveness. Resilient minds, premier results. Recognition is the first step. Make sure you see these things early on. The quicker we can catch it, the better. As always, this episode is meant to provide tools for performance, not to replace individualized therapy. If you're struggling with anxiety, burnout, or persistent stress, professional guidance is critical. At Premier Performance, we work with high achievers to implement strategies like these with precision, accountability, and results. I make it a point to give you actionable tools to find success in your life. So let me know if it's helping. I love staying connected with all of you guys. And I'd love to hear how this episode specifically impacts you. If you do find it very helpful, make sure to leave a review. That always helps us out as we're trying to get this into as many people as we can and just spread the awareness of these things to people. If you have anybody in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this episode, send it their way and share it with them. You never know if this is the exact thing that someone needs to hear, and it might push them on the path to making things better in their own life. So share it with people you can, leave us a review if you can. And if you have any questions, make sure you reach out and talk to us and just let us know how things are going. We love being connected and hearing how things are going for you guys. So there's a few different ways you can reach out and connect. You can email me at tmailer@premierperformancereno.com. You can text or call me directly at 775-561-0056. We have the Instagram and the TikTok with the same name for both of those that you can follow us on, which is premier_performance_Reno. We have the Facebook page and the LinkedIn page that have the same name for both of those, which is Premier Performance LLC. We have the Twitter or the X account, which is at Premier Reno LLC. And finally, our website, which is www.premierperformancereno.com. So make sure you reach out and connect with us. Let us know how things are going. We want to hear successes, the disappointments, anything in between. We'd love to help with whatever you're struggling with. At the end of the day, we just want to be a resource for you guys. Get involved on those social media accounts as we drop new content literally every single day. We have new podcast episodes coming out every week. We're going to keep on building what we've already created, and we're going to keep going with all these things. Next week, we're going to jump into what it means to create a championship environment, which can be hugely important for so many different teams and businesses and companies. So we're going to jump into what that looks like and how to do it so you guys can start creating these things in your life and make it what you want it to be. I hope you guys all get out there and go live life to the fullest. Go enjoy yourself. Go have some fun. Push yourself and go chase something that scares you just a little bit and see how far you can take yourself and see what the potential you have is. Don't be afraid to push yourself. Don't be afraid to reach for the stars. And if there's anything you need while you're on these journeys, make sure you let us know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week as we keep going. I'll talk to you guys soon.